Hi there. Welcome, everyone. I look forward to having you join us today. Before we jump in, we've got some of just our usual housekeeping tips that I want to share with you and give some time for everyone to join in on our conversation today. First, as you heard, as we call in the industry, the voice of God, the voice of Zoom told you we are recording this session. It will be recorded and we'll send you a copy of it. So don't worry if you missed something, we'll make sure you get a copy of that. If you need to leave for whatever reason, you'll have that recording to refer to later. This session does qualify for a CAE, CMP, and a CEM credit for 1 hour. We'll send you a certificate of attendance. You do need to stay for the majority of the time, but we'll send that shortly after the webinar is done. And then we'll also do all the proper recordings. And then also, we're going to be using both the chat and the Q&A portion of Zoom. So if you have any questions, comments, you all usually have really great examples of what you've been doing as well. So definitely chime in when you can. Love to hear from you. And we'll try to get to your questions as you ask them. If not, we definitely will have time at the end to address them. And as you see, we popped up a couple of polls. Just wanted to see kind of what you're doing with your mobile apps. If you have one, if you don't worry. We know that you're probably exploring. And then the second question is just kind of what kind of features you prioritize. So I'll give you some time to fill out that poll. And in the meantime, let me introduce you to Matthew McHugh with Guidebook. Welcome, Matthew.
Hi everybody. Hi, Vanu. Thanks for inviting me to join. Happy to be here.
Oh, this is exciting. You know, one of the things that this session, this is why we want to do this session, we get asked a lot, what is the difference between an event app and a mobile app? How does it all work together? How do you make the most of both platforms? And, like working with a mobile app, there's nothing, I think that is a question that's always been there, right? It's not a pre-pandemic, it's not a pandemic or post-pandemic issue. It's something that we always struggled with any kind of event technology, right? But before we jump into that, let's we have a good number of people who've taken the poll. So why don't we share that poll and share the results? And by the way, we have Gil Gonzalez being our event tech for us today. So if you guys have any problems, definitely ping Gil on chat and he'll try to help you out. So here we go. And it seems like a lot of you do have a mobile app. That's great. And some of you have it integrated and some of you don't. So throughout this session today, I would love to hear from you all in terms of some of the challenges that you're seeing. Matthew will be definitely going over some of those and how to overcome them. And then Matthew, if you can see here, there's the magic that they want out of their mobile app. And it looks like appointment setting is really high on the list, very close to calendar creation. So I think you kind of have some ideas about things that we should talk about today.
I do. I actually had a couple of those kind of on my list already.
Oh, great. So Matthew, before we start, I think of, I've been in this meeting planning space for 30 years and I've used a lot of different technology and I always have the best intent of like getting things. And I equate it to, I did a post on LinkedIn this morning because I was just thinking about all the things in my life that I buy into. Like the thing I posted on LinkedIn was about a vacuum cleaner and all the attachments. And I'm like, this is wonderful. This vacuum cleaner is going to clean my house. And I get all the attachments, right? And then I start thinking about, about months later and the dust is collecting on the vacuum cleaner. And I'm like, yeah, good intent, but I didn't quite have that plan. Do you have something that you've purchased, whether it's in this space or not, something you've purchased, a similar kind of situation?
Yeah, I saw that post and immediately knew what my answer to that question was. And it is essentially a clothing steamer. It's one of the ones that kind of, if you can visualize this, kind of stands upright, has a kind of reservoir for water at the bottom. But the idea is you hang your kind of wrinkled, shirt or pants on top of it and you use a steamer to just kind of steam it. Bought it and it's been collecting dust in the closet ever since. I've never used it. And I thought it was a big game changer. It was the whole value prop is that, hey, here's a tool. You don't have to use like an ironing board. You don't have to, lug the ironing board out. You can do it all with the steamer, but just didn't use it.
Yeah. Do you can you take it with you to trade shows and like iron your tablecloths and your drapes?
Oh, there's an area for some good innovation right now for trade shows, like the trade show tablecloths and things like that, finding a nice way to kind of steam those out? I suppose you could, but I would not physically want to do it, to carry that thing around.
Well, great. And I think it
Yeah.
just goes to the point that, whether it's in our personal lives, professional lives, there's always technology that we always think can address a pain point, and it's with the best of intention. But in actuality, it's about having that tool, having a plan for it, and actually using it for that, right? And I think with mobile apps, it's kind of the same thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We look anytime we look to adopt a new piece of technology, we do it with the best of intent. We want it to improve a certain area, aspect, or several aspects of either our work or personal lives.
Yeah. So Matthew, today I want to talk about three things when it comes to mobile apps: why you need a mobile app and why it needs to be integrated into your event app if you have one. Some of the challenges around the integration piece, because I know sometimes, especially if we're not techies, like can be a very intimidating subject. And then the third piece of some examples of what you've seen your clients do to increase engagement, increase revenue, by adding additional assets, those kind of things. But let's start off with, why do we need a mobile app?
Yeah, certainly. So at its core, the mobile app allows us to meet people where they are. We can look at ourselves as examples right now. At any given point in time, probably a few of us may be getting distracted by our own phones at this very moment, whether notifications are going off or things like that. Bottom line is that people have their phones, they take them wherever they go. We use them to view and manage content, in our personal and professional lives. We use them to connect and engage with each other. All of the things that we hope to do with like our association members, for example, to kind of engage them with things related to our association. We're all already doing in our own personal lives with these phones. So we're meeting people, where they are. And the other additional insight when we're looking at why use a mobile app within the scope of for using for events, aside from offering, that is a medium to connect and engage with content and other people, it also gives us, as the owners of the event experience itself, valuable insights on usage. What did people gravitate towards at the event, or what did they not gravitate towards the event? There's a whole ecosystem in there that we could legitimately take probably all afternoon and still have some time left over. But that's my high level for why we would need an event mobile app.
Great. And then let's talk a little bit about the integration with event apps. I think now a lot of people are seeing the value, and they see the difference, right? The difference between what a mobile app does and what an event app does. But there's so many similarities, and they want to bridge that gap. What are you hearing in terms of from your customers or prospects that are talking about bridging that gap? Are they wanting to do a connection between the two? And what are some of the advantages of doing that?
Yeah, certainly. So those connections essentially just make life easier. If we were to go back since the dawn of event apps, for example, we go back, 10, 15 years, where kind of the gold standard is, hey, we have, you can have a platform where you can go in and similar like Squarespace, let's build an event app. Do a lot of work doing that. Platforms can certainly and have certainly made it easier to kind of manually kind of manage content. Think about all the things that you're responsible for as the owner of an event, like registrants, sessions, speakers, exhibitors, sponsors, the myriad of things. When we plug our event app platform, any event app platform, into another system, the other system that you're using to kind of help manage that event, you can save countless hours of your kind of manual labor by seamlessly integrating and bringing over that core content. That's at a high level one of the big things that you would want to kind of look for is how much content can we bring over, like with an integration.
Yeah. So when, it's interesting, I think a lot of times people think of integrations as actually doing the back end work of field mapping and endpoints and, how often data is synced and all of that. But there's also a secondary kind of, it's a primary, because I think most people think of export, import of data. So you have the one set where you can export data out of one system, import it in. Very often it's from your event app, taking all that data, importing those spreadsheets into the mobile app. And that's, kind of the basic way. And then there's this field mapping, doing the open APIs and all of that work. In your opinion, which one do you prefer?
So my preference would be API direct integration. That is kind of takes you as the event organizer kind of out of the seat of kind of the middleman of sorts to kind of get exports and put, re-import them to kind of into that secondary system. The API would certainly be preferable. A close second, though, in a world where, like our actual world, where we never get 100% of the things that we want, of course, the second best thing would be to have systems that kind of make it easier for you for those components that maybe aren't integrated to export import. Like how easy can we make it, essentially? Yeah.
Yeah, as a planner, I got to tell you, it's very daunting to have two different systems of records. And sometimes that's not it, right? You also have your AMS, or you may have your speaker management system. And, I think the last time I kind of did a survey of how many apps people, meeting planners are using, it's anywhere between 10 to 14 apps, right? Of data that's just out there in the world. So anything that could help me make it easier, and I'm not exporting and importing, it seems like the way to go. But there are some things that you should be careful about. What are some of the tips when you're thinking about integrating? For example, with Guidebook, you guys integrate with a lot of different platforms, and some of them already built and some of them people have to build. But what are some of the tips that you have for our attendees today?
Yeah, certainly. So my general kind of pro tips, kind of rules of thumb, if you will, and just kind of, I've been in this space for just coming up on a decade now, so coming up on the big 10 years in this space. And some of the things that I would recommend is, when you're shopping around and looking at providers with integrations, some of them will have a basic set. And I think based off some of the poll results here that some of you may already have, be taking advantage of some of these, is that basic information, should sync over, like schedules, speakers, sponsors, your registrants, sessions that your registrants have registered for. Wouldn't it be nice if when they log into the app, the sessions they've registered for on your other platform are already there for them? So look at those, look at the existing integration points for your providers if they do integrate. From a high level too, if you're first shopping around, take a look at your prospective providers and see if they have an open API, if they have access to the open API documentation. Better yet, if it's not behind a paywall. That kind of shows a commitment to that, that provider's, to committing to integrations, essentially. That's kind of being the backbone of all those integrations. I would also say that, some like Reg and other platforms are enthusiastically evolving their integrations with app providers. Having seen this myself over several years, I would also be inclined to ask, what's the roadmap look like in the year ahead for your integration? If it does X, Y, and Z today, what's it going to do, next year? What are you planning on it doing next year? If providers are open to including you, the client specifically, in future iterations of the integration, that's great. It's great to be able to find a provider that's essentially going to be a really good partner for you. I know in the association space, I'm not sure how other app providers approach this, but from Guidebook's vantage point, we rely heavily on the feedback of our partners when we go to open up new endpoints in our API in our system. And our partners, those in the association space, rely heavily on all their associations to inform how they build and iterate on their own integrations. So if version 1 is bringing over sessions and speakers and things like that, what's the highest priority version 2 for all of our associations? So it's good to see that good partnership there. So kind of looking for that partnership will be important too. But at the end of the day, sometimes the best provider too may not be the one that integrates absolutely everything you want. So keep that in mind. It's just, are they going to be a good partner and work with you? Along those lines too, check, this may sound like super obvious because we all do it for everything in all of our daily lives, but check out reviews, support reviews specifically. Is a provider going to be there, when you need help? What kind of standards do they have for support?
Out of curiosity, I think support is really an interesting concept, because you've got some providers who do, they're very hands-off. They're like, it's all you're on your own. And if you come across a problem, try to find an email that you can send it to on our website. And then you have the providers that are like, we're here, we're dedicated to you. How How do when you're going through that RFP process and looking for that partner, and you ask the question and the answer is, yeah, we provide support. How do you dig deeper into that? Like, what are the specific questions that you think we should be asking as a planner organization to make sure that we're really getting the support that we need and how we need it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would directly ask, what are your average reply times during the business week? What are your reply times during the weekend? What are your average full resolution times? Um, from our vantage point, we track those things heavily, being like heavily into high touch customer support. That's something that and as someone shopping around for a provider and having been kind of on both sides before, there are circumstances where like the relationship is absolutely everything. You could have, every item on the tech wish list could be crossed. But if something happens, as it often does in technology, what happens when you need support? So asking about response times, full resolution times, those will be the good key indicators. And then asking what are they willing to do? Are there any other additional kind of services they offer for enhanced support, things like that.
Now, I can see it from 2 points of view, not only as a meeting planner, but also as a mom. Like when I tell my kids, like, I need something done, they're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm like, no, now. Like my
Yeah.
expectation is now. And it is about like managing those expectations, right? Because especially when you're at an event on site, you've got trouble, you need that help. And the expectation is you're going to help me right away. But in terms of that's on site, I think, even vendors, I know at EVA, we take that very seriously. We want that event to go as seamlessly as possible. But even before the event, like months before when you first started, what do you think is realistic in terms of response times? And how do you, as the vendor, set that expectation with the client, saying, you may think it's an emergency, but it's okay. We've got it under control. It'll be handled. How do you communicate that?
So the absolute kind of fundamental core is just being completely transparent and replying quickly. We approach, like, we have an average like first reply time of within 20 minutes during the business week. It's similar over the weekends as well. But our intent is always to kind of get a full understanding of, what are the impacts? How quickly could this possibly be fixed? And, work with the client to set expectations and prioritize. We also are look to be pretty scrappy in terms of finding ways to fix solutions using every exhaustible means that we have from our end. So it's certainly, customer and client focused, from the outset. But at the end of the day, it's really important when something happens, people want to know why. We don't want to hear, and I think, ever since the days of the internet when we've sent support tickets in and we just said, well, there it goes, I'll never hear from it again. It's kind of gotten thrown into a hole. People want to not only be replied to, but they want to know what's happening. Give me the why. We want to know the why. That helps us kind of understand. Takes a little bit of the panic out of if you receive a reply that says, hey, we're working on it, and that's about it. If we said, hey, we're working on it, we expect this to happen at this date. This is what's going on behind the scenes, why we're having to work through it. That communication is key.
Yeah, I would agree. I just wish my kids came with a status button that I could see all the time, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's jump into what everybody's wanting to really hear about, like just some of the great ideas of how people are using mobile apps now. I think we've transitioned, right? In the olden days when mobile apps first came out, it was simply to just publish your event information, have an agenda for people to go to and say, I want to go to these sessions, maybe see a speaker directory and maybe see an attendee directory and and exhibitors, of course. But it's really come a long way. What are some of your favorite features that you think people should be getting excited about or don't know about?
Yeah, certainly. So apps certainly have come a long way from just being kind of the thing to have to now being a tool where we're effectively managing and deploying an app is kind of an art, and is something that you should invest the time in doing really, really well. And a lot of those I kind of put kind of success into two buckets, if you will. We got like success on the content side of the house, right? Like how well are we kind of managing and displaying the content so that our attendees can engage with it. And one of the trends we've noticed over the last 5 or so years is people want to engage with their content long after like a specific event has ended. So one of the kind of pseudo feature of sorts would be, and one of the questions that I would bring to the table too as you're searching for providers is, well, how long after an event has ended does my attendee have access to it? They want to revisit that content. They want to revisit and continue to connect and chat with people that they met there. So that's one component. The other is, how do we engage with one another? What features, things do we have, in the toolkit that allow us to chat with each other? Things like, direct messaging, matchmaking, which was on that live poll wish list, things like that. But to kind of run through my biggest list of kind of features that I like, I will start at the top. And if you have questions, please stop and ask me as we go. I'm happy to kind of handle those. But at a core, one of the core components of getting an audience engaged with content and other people in your app is the idea of an interactive feed, right? And for lack of better words, this would be something similar to like a Facebook wall, where as an attendee, anytime I look at it, it's going to show me content relevant to that specific time. So think about sessions that are coming up, for example. Think about notifications, messages, posts from the administrators. Think about other posts that attendees have made. We also want this feed to be able to help us meet other people. Is it going to recommend that I connect with certain people, similar to like that matchmaking? That's a pretty good segue into kind of one of the second pieces, which is a matchmaking component. Whereas, envision a scenario where you as the owner of an event can decide, all right, we have people attending this event. This is the focus of the sessions. These are some of the reasonable interests. Wouldn't it be great if somebody logs into the app and they get a little pop-up that says, hey, select all of these that apply to you. What out of this list interests you? And you select it as the attendee. And then as you're navigating the app, as you're looking at that interactive feed, it's going to say, hey, you know what? You should connect with John or Jane Doe because you both are interested in this. Kind of like a digital version of walking two people together and saying, hey, John and Jane Doe, you both work in XYZ, you should chat. There are ways to do that. One-to-one chat is one of the basic, kind of one of the key things that came out when people first decided, hey, we need to do more with mobile apps and just have them. People need to engage with each other. Having one-to-one chat is important. Having one-to-one, even like the ability to kind of create your own session and invite other people to it. So let's say, you and I meet up and we say, hey, we had a great chat. Let's get something, on our app calendar so that we can meet for cocktails a little later. Send an invitation. Being able to do that right within the app. How do we foster and manage group discussions and Q&A in the app? It's really popular. One of the trends we've seen is to be able to have a siloed group discussion of sorts within the scope of a specific session. Granted, if you take 2 steps back and if you're looking at that interactive feed, people can have a discussion at the event level there. You can kind of make posts and comment on posts and things like that. What if we condense that down into the session level? Do we have a feature that will allow us to have like a group discussion? We've even, we've seen speakers conduct kind of like a pseudo Q&A within those group discussions too. We're here, it's all happening live. We've all got our phones. Ask some questions. People also like to hear that too. When you stand up as a speaker and say, all right, not a lot of speakers are going to say this, but reach into your pocket and grab your phones. I want you to get on your phone for a second. And also, live polling, surveys are other great ways to kind of engage and capture, real-time feedback for your audience. Things like gamification are huge. One of the other key components too is having features that allow your attendees to message directly your sponsors or exhibitors. Like, are there features when you're looking at providers that will allow you to do that? And probably my personal favorite, it's kind of a hybrid content and kind of user engagement feature would be, do you have a feature that allows us to kind of verify the attendance of people as they're coming into sessions, like attendance verification? Hyper relevant for this specific group as well is that we have people, like if we're attending sessions for credits and we need to know for absolutely certain that somebody has physically walked into the door and sat into a seat, is there a tool that allows us to easily verify people within the app? So that was my long list.
I love your list, and I have so much follow-up on all those items. I really like the certification piece because I think that is something associations have really struggled. I have heard just in the last couple of months, I've heard some stories how some people are still using Scantron. I had to explain to my kids what Scantron was. They're like, what?
Oh, they didn't know.
So, and then also having temps at the door, taking attendance, but not having the technology do it, like just having a clipboard with checking off names. The paperwork on that has just got to be gruesome. And especially in times where organizations are very lean, right? They may not be able to justify hiring more staff to do more. So instead, we're just asking our existing staff to do more. And, how do you do that? So leveraging that technology. But I like the certification piece because you're doing something, you're using a tool that you already have with the programs, the directories, and you're saying, guess what? You can take it one step further, not pay extra because that's part of your system, right? Well, depending on your platform, but I'm assuming that it would be part of what you're paying for. But so walk me through that piece. So I have my app as an organizer, and my attendee has an app, and I needed to make sure that they've attended the session. And so I guess I need to make the decision if I need to take that attendance before, when everybody's walking in or as they're walking out. My gut feeling is saying that you want to do it at some point towards the end, so you catch the people that actually stay. So what happens at the door? Can you walk me through that? Like, help me visualize what that looks like.
Yeah, certainly. So the way that and granted, it may change from provider to provider, but the way that we've kind of approached this is that you as the event owners have different permission levels in the app than regular attendees. And at that certain permission level, I mentioned earlier, we can have like a group discussion within a specific session. If you're an administrator, right next to that little UI that has a group discussion in that session is a little button that says tools. And that allows you at the session level to walk right up to the door, open your tools that only you and the other admins are going to be able to see. And that gives you access to your scanner, which is built in like the app. And you can kind of walk in as people approach. Individual users, every user account has its own unique QR code attached to that user, located right at the bottom of their menu. They would walk up, show their code to you. You would tap the scan button and scan them right in. What happens on the back end is in real time that goes into our dashboard, into a nice exportable report with a timestamp on it. As the admin too, when you're standing there at the door, just not to go too far into the details, which absolutely rein me in if I do. I'll have a tendency to just go right down that tech rabbit hole. But just to kind of add a couple of different pieces here. If we have people walk up that don't have their phones, you have the ability to kind of just type them in, their attendance record in, so you can still verify them. Or if their phone has died, we've all had our phones die at awkward spots. But it's seamless. Our intent, our approach from a design standpoint has been to make it inclusive in the app, make it easy, and just, there are a million other things that our event organizers are doing. We just want things to be easy.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love not only the easiness of it and using what we already have. I mean, it kind of goes back to my vacuum cleaner, right? Like I just needed a plan to use it and know what my features are and actually do it, right? But I'm geeking out over the data possibilities of it, right? The data that you're collecting on the back end. Not only can you just do the reports that say, yeah, these people came in, and then you can take it back to your certification boards, but also the story that is going to tell you as an organizer of who's attending that session. If you match it back up to your AMS and telling you, what really is trending, what are people excited about, what tracks are more popular than others. But I'm going down that rabbit hole with you, but on the data side.
Yeah, I know. And so that segues into another like really key component that would be important to kind of vet as you're looking at providers is like, what do their metrics dashboards look like? Like we invest time and money to build and launch a mobile solution. This is the metrics dashboard allows us to kind of do the ROI, right? How do people engage with the app and with the content and with each other? Do you offer me kind of stepping into everybody's shoes and asking the provider, do you offer a means to kind of show, how many, not only just how many downloads, that's kind of the absolute basic bare minimum, but, of all the people that downloaded my app, how many times did they open it? And on average, how long did they spend in the app? Our kind of industry standard, gold standard for good engagement is we would want them spending about at least 30 seconds in the app every time they open it. That shows that, hey, they're engaging with features, they're engaging with content and with other people. Using ourselves as examples, if we open up our Facebook app or our mail app, we get in, we get what we need, we get out, typically 15 20 seconds. A bit longer than that is good. Seeing average durations like of a minute, more than a minute, shows us really good engagement. That's great. We need to know that. We also need to know, well, which items were clicked on the most from a high level, what sessions were most popular, what sponsors were most popular. Are you able to kind of generate reports that we can actually take to, if this is a pretty sponsor heavy event, take to our sponsors and say, hey, your banners got this many impressions, they got this many clicks, your listings on the main menu got this many clicks, this many ads, your session had this many clicks, this many ads. You can, in short order, or should be able to, if to get real value out of a platform, build a profile of usage, not only for yourself and your attendees, for all the people that have kind of planned this event, but for your sponsors and your other stakeholders, be able to take that information. It should be easily digestible and accessible. One of the other kind of things that I would add as a bonus too is that metrics and viewing all of the engagement doesn't have to be something that is only done after an event ends. It's pretty, I spoke earlier about, deploying mobile as kind of like an art form. Metrics and usage is important the second week after you've begin to promote your app, leading up to the event, during the event, and after the event. Is your provider going to offer you tools that would help you even reward your highly engaged users? That's one of the things that I know a lot of associations, it seems like a trend is like, we want to make sure members are engaged. There are tools that will allow you to kind of find out who is the most engaged user of your app, who posted the most, made the most connections, clicked on the most things. You can, in short order, generate reports to find that out. We've had many clients kind of offer rewards to their most highly engaged users and call them out and give them kudos in the app. We also use reports like that to better inform our promotional strategy. If we're worried about people downloading the app, let's say about a week after we've promoted it, we generate a report and we have a list of everybody that has downloaded it and engaged in the app, and we have a list of people that have not logged in or done anything. So maybe we take that list of those kind of slow adopters, recycle them back into our promotional pushes, and kind of remind them gently to kind of download the app and get it. So there's a lot, like I mentioned, having gone down the rabbit hole myself just now.
No, but I like that little rabbit hole that you went down just now, because you talked about, because a lot of times we do think about those that are engaged, that they're easy to find because they're engaged, right? They're posting, they're your best brand ambassadors for your meeting or your organization, right? And you want to embrace them, and they're probably people you already know. But the piece that associations want is, what about everybody else that's not as vocal, but they're very important, not only from like renewing your membership and coming back next year, but also making sure that there's that engagement, because everybody's coming to the event because they want to make a connection. And if it's only a top 5% that's making a connection, you got to figure out the rest of the piece, and you got to know who they are. So what you described right there of like taking that bucket of people who aren't as engaged and trying to figure out what is going to motivate them. Is it an incentive, like a financial incentive, or is it, just trying to figure out what makes them tick, right? And I think you can find what makes them tick if you look at some of the other data analytics, right? But I like that part that you talk about the messaging and the marketing of it, because I think that's critical. Again, it goes back to, you can have a mobile app or an event app that does everything, has all the bells and whistles, and you can enable all of them, right? You can turn them all on. But if you don't tell people where they are or how to use them, then that makes it difficult. Do you have tips What have you seen done well that your clients have done to get the word out? You mentioned like incentivizing them. Is there like a reward that caught your attention? I think one of our clients did a Peloton bike. Another one did an iPad. I mean, big ticket items, but it doesn't always have to be big, does it?
No, it doesn't always have to be big. I think hands down the most common one that I've seen kind of I just kind of item incentivized has been something like similar to like an iPad. Also kind of, relative like gift cards to local areas, spas, things like that have been big. I think one of the biggest things I've seen too to really jumpstart engagement, and it doesn't cost anything, but it is proven time and time again incredibly effective, is to kind of lead by example. And what I mean by that is when our app goes live and we're ready for everybody to be commenting on the feed and posting photos to like the photo album feature, be the first to hop in as the event organizer and the planning group. Go in and make a post, add some pictures, just kind of spark that fire. That typically snowballs. Everybody wants to participate. Like most people end up wanting to participate, but nobody really wants to be the first one in. I think there's a we have this tendency to think, I'm sure we've all been there. We've thinking about posting something, whether it's on Facebook or LinkedIn, and you're thinking, man, are people going to like this? Is this going to get any reactions? Or, oh, has it been sitting around for a while? Nobody's liked it. What's wrong with my post? there's a lot. There's kind of like
It's
at
an
least some
emotional roller
hesitation.
coaster.
Yeah, it's an emotional roller coaster. So leading by example, I think is huge too.
Yeah. And I like that, not only for you're encouraging the event organizer to do it, but I've also worked with organizations where we've actually went to the board, we went to the volunteer committee and educated them like, hey, we've got this great app. This is a great way for you all to get support, get your name out there, like figure out who can be our brand ambassadors and get that word out for us and get them on there. Because I know that especially during the pandemic or when things started opening up and I couldn't travel to events and I would see, my peers going to like different industry events at a major FOMO, right? Like I was like, oh, I want to be where they are. But it was great to see what was happening. It made me feel like I was a part of something, right? I was able to participate and engage in my own way, even though I couldn't physically be there. So to your point, I really like that piece. I do want to go back to the exhibitors and sponsors, because for a lot of organizations, that's how we can pay the bills, right? And you talked about making appointments with exhibitors and some of the data points. What are you seeing exhibitors and sponsors wanting out of a mobile app? Like they get to put up their profile, but I can't imagine that that's all that they want.
Yeah. They, from what I've seen, is exhibitors want to be able to justify, and sponsors want to be able to justify their cost of attendance and their presence. So being able to contact, connect with those attendees, being able to just kind of certifiably see XYZ has been my impact in this app. This has been my level of exposure. Having the opportunity then to kind of, reasonably improve that exposure year over year. Like, being able to kind of see the clear path towards increasing that exposure. If, let's say, for example, I'm a bronze sponsor this year, I've purchased just the rotating banner ad that got X amount of impressions, X amount of clicks. I like that. That was great. I also received, X amount of sponsor inquiries from my listing in the app, or attendee inquiries rather, from my listing in the app, meaning the attendee. I clicked on the page and I saw their listing. I was like, all right, I'm going to send them a message. I'm curious about their product. How can I further increase that? What are their features and options? Where else can I go? For the associations, that means where else, if the sponsor wants to increase their footprint, what's the cost justification for that? How much should that cost for them? What's the true value there?
One of the things when I've helped associations like put together their prospectus and all the assets that they get, and they talk to exhibitors, and usually it's a marketing person that makes that decision and activates it all, but the person on site may not be the one that was privy to all those conversations, so they don't really know what they have, right? But what I found, and it's low cost. It's just a matter of time, right? Is, setting up, whether it's a webinar or a how-to sheet that you send out. I love doing kind of a 30-minute webinars before even webinars were popular, right? With exhibitors, and more than a webinar, more like a meeting, a virtual meeting where we'd say, hey guys, not only for marketing people, but let's bring your people, your booth staff that's going to be there, and let's talk about all the tools that you have at your disposal for the event. So not only do you have these sessions that you're going to, but you have this mobile app, which is a tool, and walking them through how do you use it, what are some benefits out of it, how would, if I was an exhibitor, how would I go about, stalking my targets? Because that's what it is, right? That's what they want. They want to find the people that they're most interested in. You may have, I'm notorious for talking about, in a prospectus, you talk about 10,000 people are coming to your trade show or to your conference. Well, exhibitors may not be interested in all 10,000 people. They have a very specific niche, right? To be able to figure out, how, and they know who they want. And there's going to be a sub segment of the 10,000 people. But how do they find them, right? If you don't have a mobile app, and, otherwise you're just kind of going around looking at name badges and hoping you run into the right people. But the mobile app can help you that, right? You can just do a search.
Yeah, there's a lot of different and there's a lot of way to drive traffic too at the event using the mobile app. So aside from just kind of generally using searches to find specific content, it's important to have really good search in your app too. That's something definitely to kind of check with prospective providers. Is there a global search? Is there a specific search within, like, we have a list of exhibitors, like how deep does that search go? If we are, and this kind of goes back more to the content side of the spectrum, like if content is linked to any degree to content in the app, is that going to be searchable? So for those niche people that are trying to find their exhibitor or vice versa, how easy does the management of that content and the search functionality make that possible? One of the other components, and this kind of goes back to engagement, is you can use things like, and there are a ton of different gamification, tools and games out there. One of the ones that we use is like a QR scavenger hunt, where you essentially decide on a phrase. Maybe it can be, thank you for joining, the XYZ conference this year. And then decide on how many QR codes that you need. And that game is, as you print out the QR codes, give them to the sponsors and exhibitors. And as people scan those codes, the phrase is filled out. Once the phrase is filled out, congratulations, you've won, or you've completed the phrase. You can, enter your information for a chance to win a prize. So you can drive traffic that way as well.
And I want to follow up on that because I actually experienced it as an exhibitor at a show not too long ago, where we had signed up to be part of a scavenger hunt. And somebody would come by, and instead of a code, they asked for a password or some kind of secret code that only we had. And come the day of the event, somebody actually approaches us and we're like, what password? What scavenger hunt? What are you talking about? But it was quickly remedied. Someone that on the exhibits team actually came booth by booth to check in on us. And we said, what's going on? What is the scavenger hunt? And they simply just educated us. And that made such a great impact for someone to visit us at a booth and just kind of tell us, this is how you use that to your benefit. This is what's happening. And I think communication, is the key with all of this, no matter what feature you use. It's not only communicating to the attendees, hey, these are available, and this is how you use it, but also to the exhibitors and sponsors, like, hey, you have this stuff. I'm not going to assume that you know how to use it. Let me show you, because it varies, right? There's every show you go to, it could be a different app, it can be a different program, and different things. But what you don't want to do is have them miss out on something that's already available to them.
Yeah, certainly not. And and that kind of goes back to just the idea, the concept of user management, right? Within the scope of our event, we have exhibitors, sponsors, we have attendees broken down into, maybe even different like tracks of schedules, right? They're attending, they're interested in, XYZ sessions. When you're looking for providers, when it comes to kind of improving the quality of life and your ability to message not only everybody that has the app. We all know, like, yeah, we'll send a push notification to everybody. Everybody will get one. Can you segment your users and push notify them that way? If you were to say, just using your example right now, Vino, is that, let's say we had our exhibitors in a users list associated with a group that we could push notify to say, hey, be sure to check your email. Important information has just been sent to you about the scavenger hunt game that people will be playing at your booths. So that's also, yeah. And that also goes back, yeah. And that circles back to you know, that communication, you know, whether it's communication through support or with attendees, it's just, that's key.
Yeah, and I like that you it doesn't have to be outside of the tool. It could be within the tool, or it could be outside of the tool, whatever really fits. And I don't want it to seem, you know, one of the things, there are tons of great ideas, right? I wish I had time to activate everything that was possible. But one of the things I like talking to planners about is keep it simple. You know, come up with what your goals are, and then figure out what tools make sense that will help you achieve those goals. And so, you know, I don't know if you see a lot of that, like a lot of associations or organizations just go and they're like, okay, we're going to activate all these things. And, you know, they're not being, you know, the messaging is not going out about, they're not being utilized. Do you see that a lot?
I think when you mentioned that, it reminds me of something that the way that like developers build programs now versus the way they used to back, you know, way back in the day, 30 or so years ago. It's like comparing what is called like the Agile method versus the Waterfall method. And just kind of super brief recap is the Agile method means you have developers that build the program piece by piece. As they build it, they test it. It's good, great, we'll build the next piece. Doing that allows them to kind of make changes and adjust as they go. The old way of doing it, maybe back, you know, in the 90s, is that, all right, we have the idea, this is the entire program. This is absolutely everything. This is the big ticket. This is the wish list. Build it all and launch it at the end. The problem with that is that by the time you're done building it all and launching it, some of those features weren't as impactful as you thought they were. Some of them may not even be relevant anymore. You've taken a long time building something that needs improvement and adjustment right away. By taking a more iterative approach to it, similar to the kind of saying, hey, instead of, you know, keeping the scope kind of small at first, that allows you to kind of build upon that, because you're going to discover things at your event that maybe you were not even on your radar. Maybe something you really want to do next year isn't even something you thought about this year. And by kind of tightening your scope, you're going to allow position yourself best to succeed in delivering that, and position yourself best to kind of pivot to the needs of your audience and your organization when you launch those future events. Not so much about, you know, backing down from aspirational features for things that you need to have, and more about just kind of being more strategic and kind of anticipating your need to kind of, you know, pivot and move and adjust and grow.
Yeah, I always think it's better to take on what you can chew than choking on too much of it, right? Like it's because then you just, you know, I know as a planner, we want to appease, we're people that want to solve things, and we want to do as much as possible, right, to make everybody happy and to make it productive and successful. But doing too much may be counterproductive. And to your point, like just picking the ones that are more strategic and meet those goals, I think is important. I do like what you also mentioned earlier is about this concept of extending the content. I think a lot of times we think of, when we talk about extending content, extending engagement, I think some people may think, oh my God, I got to create more content. I can't possibly think of doing that. So I like the idea of what you're talking about. It's like you have content and you can keep posting, you know, like it can live outside of the ballroom doors, right? It's beyond those 3 days. Can you talk a little bit more about that, about, you know, how does one do that, you know, makes it easy so I'm not recreating content? And how do I get people to know about it and use it? Because I think, you know, and I'm just as guilty as anyone. When I go to a show, you know, I download the app, I'm using it, but as soon as I'm on the flight back, you know, I take my information that I need, I don't look at that app again. So what are some of your tips for getting people engaged in that beyond the conference days?
One of the big things that we've seen that wasn't necessarily a surprise, but I suppose it falls under the bucket of something we weren't necessarily expecting, is that associations, and this kind of goes into engagement too, is that let's say you have an app, and within that app you've launched your conference instance for like the annual conference. As an association, you have other events too, right? And those events, as they get published to the app, one of the things that we've realized is that there's a lot of kind of cross promotion between events. So if I'm done with the app for XYZ event, as other individuals download the app for the next event, you can kind of, depending on how you've, set your visibility of these specific instances up, see other events and get engaged for other events. We've had members, find and decide to join other events that weren't necessarily on their radar because they saw it in the app as they were accessing the content. We've also seen a trend where people do tend to kind of engage with content and message people they've met at a conference a bit after their event too. Actually, I think you and I were talking about this conference in November of last year that I had gone to, and I used it last week to message somebody. So having that content available, that's another piece that when you talk to providers that you're vetting, is that, well, how long after the event will individuals have content to? But also kind of circling back to making kind of that content relevant, even kind of taking like a year-round approach to it, is, well, what kind of information is useful for attendees? How can we, additionally, use tools like push messaging to notify people? If we keep people in the app, if they have exposure to other events that are taking place, you can really cultivate a pretty positive feedback loop of engagement that just keeps people coming back.
Yeah. And I also like this. I think we are creatures of habit, right? It's we're used to, we've all been kind of trained to not look at that app after the conference. So we've got to be very intentional and very upfront about communicating with everyone and say, hey, don't delete it. There's more to come. And you said something that caught me earlier as well, when you're talking about, speakers can even talk about it, right? Like incorporating some of these tools into the conversations, whether it's general session or your speakers are advocating for it. I think we're seeing a lot more tools in the event space that are transforming speakers to be those brand ambassadors, right? It's not enough. I mean, I remember back in the direct mail days, you give the speakers postcards, and they'd send those postcards out to their people, say, join me, I'm speaking at whatever. And now we're doing digital posts that the speakers can do. But now I think even more so, that can also translate very easily into the mobile app world, right? Encourage your speakers to not only talk about it, but say, hey, connect with me on the app, which may or may not be linked, connected to LinkedIn or whatever social media, but it encourages that usage. Have you seen anything interesting like that? I mean, you talked about speakers, have you seen anything interesting like that?
Yeah, and speakers are like the analog beacon of engagement at our events, right? They're the ones engaging, with our attendees, at their sessions. So having tools to give them a voice is important. Q&As, live polls, having them, the ability to connect with other individuals, anybody they want with, even with shared interests and things like that is pretty important. That even goes back to kind of that search functionality, right? We've had, it's not uncommon for attendees to be going to an event just to see what a specific speaker is doing. Did that myself last year. Making it easy for attendees to find those speakers and vice versa is pretty critical.
Yeah. And definitely. And, I think a lot of people they're already doing some type of events, whether it's like meet the speaker, a book signing, and there's no reason why that kind of concept can't live on an app, on an event app, anything like that. But Matthew, this has been great. I mean, we've covered so much. Have we missed anything? Is there anything else? I know I have two last questions, but I'm saving those to the end.
No, I let's do the last questions. I may have a couple of questions for you, and this hour has absolutely flown by. So yeah, let's do it.
And Matthew, this has been just great. Not only from your perspective as an app provider, but also seeing what you see from customer side as well. Because I think we learn what others do, and seeing that in action. We learn from their successes, and we also learn from their failures. So, have you seen anything not go down well?
Oh, have I seen anything not go down well? I remember last year, I've seen, and this is something that I think affected website app providers, like everybody connected to the internet. There was an AWS, who doesn't use AWS these days, had a brief outage where there was a hiccup in a lot of different services, which I've seen not go well. But kind of, which we can chuckle about now, but taking kind of like a sharper focus. One of the things that I've seen it's kind of sneaky. It's not like a single thing that goes bad, but it's something to be cognizant of because it can cause problems, is kind of a native versus web application if you're looking at providers. And one of the key kind of value adds for a native application is that you as the attendee can open it up. All the content that's in there, your schedules, things like that, is accessible regardless of whether or not you have internet connectivity, which is great. For a web app, it's essentially kind of a mobile optimized website. You require an internet connection. On any given day, those don't really cause an issue. As we all know, once you get to an event site with a conference center, sometimes the Wi-Fi can be spotty, or if we're doing something on a plane as we get there, or anywhere. They kind of leave us vulnerable to kind of a poor user experience if there's any hiccup in internet connectivity. So my big thing, native apps, I'm a big champion for. That native component allows you to have those tools in your pocket, regardless of your connectivity.
On a completely side note, if any of you are looking for ways to help reduce your internet costs because a property is trying to gouge you for that, I've got some secret ways. Ping me later. That's a different conversation about Wi-Fi at properties. I have
that's actually yeah, like from probably some tried and true lessons from your experience as a meeting planner, right?
Exactly. Because I was like, I had one property who wanted to charge $20,000 for a 1,500 person conference, and I'm like, that's not feasible. And we came up with another way to make sure that everyone had internet access. Hotel wasn't happy with us, but the client and the attendees were ecstatic. But we're out of time, so you guys will have to ping me, and I'm happy to share how we did that. But with 3 minutes left, I want to ask you two questions, Matthew.
All right.
What is your most favorite app professionally, like that you use that you can't live without?
Oh, professionally, my favorite app is hands down the Slack app, which it's everybody. I mean, probably a lot of people use it. Maybe, I would hope. But it's essentially like a chat app for companies. And just kind of my favorite feature within that app is the ability to schedule direct messages to be sent out at later times. I work with a lot of people that are in different time zones. We've got an office over in London. I'll often schedule a message and we'll say, all right, I'll send this to Stuart at like 10 a.m. his time. It really helps me keep on top of things.
And then what about personally?
Oh, personally, probably the Spotify app. I would absolutely mourn the loss of the Spotify app if I lost it. There are a few pieces of the UI that don't feel super intuitive all the time, but the app does what I need it to do, and I do love having access. This is kind of going back to what you mentioned about content in the app, having access to all of my previous playlists, which is great.
Yeah, I have a teenage daughter who likes Spotify, and I've been trying to get her playlist, and she won't share. So if you know how, I need to get some tips from you.
I'll go on record as saying that part of the UI is easy. It's easy to share, so she's holding back on it.
Then you need to show me how I can hijack it. Well, thank you so much, Matthew. Lots of great tips, everything from why I need it to integration tips, and then just how to get people excited about your mobile app and all the great tools that can be available. So thank you. If people, throw up the contact slide. If people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way?
The best way to reach out to us if you're looking to vet us as a prospective provider, sales@guidebook.com will be the route to go. You can peruse our website as well, guidebook.com.
Great.
Well,
Thank you, Matthew. And for everyone else, thank you so much for joining us. We know that you have a lot of choices when it comes to webinars, but we love that you came to us. Please do connect with us on LinkedIn. We'd love to see you. We got more great stuff coming up, whether it's a blog article, funny posts, or just another webinar. But we hope to see you soon. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to ping either Matthew, or I later. But otherwise, enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everybody.